right now with Sean Fitzpatrick from the University of Lethbridge on his talk, How a PreTeXt Conversion Made Me a PreTeXt Convert.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here, and thank you, Miro, for the invitation. I had the impression you want me to cause trouble, so I'll see what I can do. Okay, so I'm here to talk about work I've done with PreTeXt. I will have to also tell you what PreTeXt is if you've never seen it before. There is a QR code if you want a web version of my slides, but I'll warn you that these slides do not work nicely on small mobile phones. So you might want to get the URL and then open it somewhere else. And there are lots of links in the slides, which is why you might want to have access. So I'll wait 1 second because I see phones pointing at the screen. Okay. I'll wait. By the way, the slides are also created in PreTeXt. This is the one exception of a PreTeXt created thing that does not play nicely with mobile devices. I might talk about that in a minute too. All right, we ready to go? We're ready. Okay. So I'll tell you a little bit about how I got started, and then we'll get into the the meat of this stuff. I started at the University of Lethbridge a little over a decade ago, and one of the first things that I was told to do was make a textbook for a new course that we were developing, which was going to be this sort of, they're not quite ready to take calculus, but we want to see some calculus, so we'll do half pre-calc, half calc. I found one commercial book. I think it was by Lawson. It was a Cengage book. At the time, to buy the entire book, it was like $400. This was peak Cengage, right? Stewart was up there too at the time. It's come down since then. They were very expensive. And then we said, okay, this is too expensive. Can we get like a custom version that only has the chapters we're going to use? Maybe that's better. No, well, yeah, I guess we could, but it's the binder ready thing. $130 for some shrink wrap loose leaf. And I said, I'll get back to you. So instead we looked around, found some open resources using, I don't know if you're aware of it. I should have put the link. I have many links, but I don't have this link. The American Institute of Mathematics has a website called the AIM Approved Textbooks List, and they have some open textbooks on there. And I found one that worked for pre-calc. I found one that worked for calc. And so we gave students the PDFs, and then the bookstore also slapped things together into a course pack for people who wanted it in print. So those were the two books I used. It worked out okay. But students didn't like the fact that it was clearly two different books with very, like the style was different. They're like, no, I want a single book. So I tried to put them together into one book. They're both written in LaTeX. They're both open source books. I don't know if you've ever tried combining different people's LaTeX code before. It's not fun. And when it's a very large book with lots of macros, it's even worse. So anyway, I got it done, and we liked Apex, so we started using it for all of our calculus courses. And it was nice. We could customize. We could say, here's the Calculus 1 book, the Calculus 2. We could split off the chapters that we needed. Started using WebWork for homework as well. You'll never guess who got the job of running the server for that. It was me. Anyway, that was okay. Eventually, I came across PreTeXt because I was working on this Callisto project, which was an old thing. It was a CAN code thing. It was one of Jim Colliander's babies. And they were trying to create these Jupyter notebooks for K-12 computational thinking. And it was fun. They gave me the job of seeing if I could find some way of taking like open textbooks out there and doing some sort of machine conversion into Jupyter notebooks. Well, that's maybe not so easy, but it turns out, as I was, spending my time on Google, that there was already a way of writing open textbooks that had a Jupyter conversion as one of the workflows, which was PreTeXt. And so we got talking to them about this Callisto project, but then pretty soon they said, oh, you're using Apex Calculus, because I had talked to Greg Hartman, who was the author back when I was using the PDF versions. And they said, we're working on this PreTeXt version of Apex. Would you like to be involved? So I said yes. And then Alex Jordan stopped being an editor because his college stopped using the book. And David Farmer got busy with other things. And Greg Hartman is still not entirely convinced that there could be anything better than PDF. So he's not super active. I don't know. Somehow I am now the editor-in-chief of Apex. I didn't intend for this to happen. I'm there by default. So that's how I got into this mess. So let me tell you what is PreTeXt. Well, it's yet another way to make open textbooks. This time we write in XML. Now, why XML? Because XML can be very highly structured. You can put as much metadata as you want into XML with tags and things. And this was something that came up the other day. I was talking to Rob Beezer, who's kind of the creator of this and still the sort of benign dictator for life of the PreTeXt project. And, there are downsides of writing source that is not highly structured. It's easy to go from highly structured source to unstructured source. There are lots of, like Pandoc will do that for you in 10 seconds. Going the other direction is very hard. And we were talking to somebody who was involved with a Department of Education contract in the US to write a bunch of high school textbooks, but they were using Pressbooks. Pressbooks has XML format. It's not very well structured XML. And they're like, can we convert these to PreTeXt? And we said, well, kind of. We can get you started, but you're going to be missing about 80% of what you need. So there's going to be a lot of hand editing involved. But they had the problem that, Pressbooks sells itself as an open platform. It's open to users of the books as long as the owner of the book is willing to keep paying Pressbooks to host it, right? When the grant ran out, so did their Pressbooks contract, and all those books they had spent 3 years writing are now gone. Nobody can access them because they don't have access to Pressbooks anymore. PreTeXt, we get things on the web, and the HTML format is quite nice. I'll try to show you some in a bit. But you can have any web server you want, anywhere in the world. You can put your PreTeXt books on there, and you don't need anyone's permission to do it. You can still produce print. You can do EPUB. EPUB's a little bit harder. I think there's some, getting the Kindle stamp of approval takes a bit of work to do all the verification, but some people manage to get it to work. I'll talk about the difference between HTML and Runestone HTML if I don't run out of time. You can make slides. These are written in PreTeXt, by the way. Jupyter notebooks, the conversion is kind of broken, which is ironic because that's how I got started in this in the first place. There are issues there. One of these days, maybe this summer, maybe next summer, we'll get Jupyter figured out. Another big one is that you can convert to Braille from PreTeXt. So one of the problems that I think people have with commercial textbooks is if you have a blind student who needs a Braille version of that textbook, it takes about 3 years and $10,000 for somebody to convert that book into Braille. They do it by hand. We can produce a file in about 5 minutes that you can send to an embosser, and then it takes however long it takes to emboss it. You pay for the paper that goes into the embosser, and that's it, right? I guess the other part of PreTeXt is the PreTeXt community. There are lots of people. They're all very supportive. I'm at events like these because I learned a lot of my kind of, MathEd things from PreTeXt people. That's the first place I ever heard about things like standards-based grading and team-based learning and all these things. I learned about it from PreTeXt, and there's great people. And there's people doing a lot of math education research. One of the nice things, with HTML, you can build in other things. Vilma Mesa and some people at UMichigan do a lot of work with PreTeXt, and they're doing math education research. They did a few years ago, one of the things they did was they put some essentially tracking software into the textbooks, but they used this to kind of study how students were using the book. And they made these heat maps. Where do they go in the books and when? And you can find the linear learners who read from beginning to end. You can find the ones that just jump to the theorems or they just jump to the examples. You can find the ones that only open the textbook the day before the exam. You know, they had all this great data on learning how people use the textbooks, which was very interesting, which I don't think you can do with a paper book. So the HTML is not the only format, but it's the reason that most people use PreTeXt, if we're being honest, right? The philosophy, and Rob will kind of get mad at people when they only think about the HTML, says, no, you have to think about building the other formats too. It's important to be able to build them, but we mostly want the HTML because HTML is interactive and you can do so many things that you can't do in a PDF or print or any other format, right? You can put videos in. By the way, these all link to things, I don't know, I might show you some links, but you probably don't want to see all of them. I don't know. Let's see. That link didn't work. Hang on. Let me hide my tools. Give me 1 second here. Where is the hide video panel? No. Oh, no. Okay. Usually there's a thing there to hide this stupid Zoom thing so I can see the tabs on my web browser. Okay. Here's a, I don't know, here's a section from, oh, this is about the squeeze theorem. But, before, pre-pandemic, I spent time making videos on a whiteboard, and I can pop those into the book, right? So students can read the example, or they can watch the video. In a lot of the worked examples, you see things like this. Here's an example using the squeeze theorem. Do you want to read the text solution? Maybe. Maybe you don't like reading and you'd rather just watch the video solution. You can do that instead, right? So we can provide options like that. And we make sure we don't leave out the students that get the PDF. We do, the University of Lethbridge is situated in Blackfoot territory in southern Alberta, right next to the Blood Reserve, which is the largest by area First Nation in Canada. And a lot of those students don't have web access when they go home. So we can give them a PDF. Where is it? Here it is. And if their phone has mobile data, there's QR codes that these are generated automatically when you build the PDF. I don't have to do anything to get those in there. So you can read the PDF, snap the QR codes, and that works just as well. Okay. What else can you do? Web work exercises. And let me jump back here. Sorry, I'm going to scroll. Don't get seasick. Here's some web work exercises in the book. They appear as just sort of static exercises, but I can click an activate button. And that loads up now as a web work problem. I can type my answer in there. Oh, let's see, can I do it? 36 minus 18. 23, I think, is the answer. Let's find out. Okay, good, I got it right. So you can put things like web work exercises in there. There's also support for MyOpenMath. There's some people working on Stack, which is kind of originally a Moodle thing. Interactive exercises, this comes from Runestone, but isn't exclusive to Runestone. So there are multiple choice. There's matching problems like drag and drop matching. Parsons problems, if you're familiar with them, these are these sort of draggable proofs, you might call them, right? You can take a proof, cut it up into pieces, see if the students can reassemble them in the correct order to build a proof. So we can do interactive exercises like that. Code cells. So if I jump back to this book, let me find some examples. You can use Sage Math Cell to run Python code that you can execute in browser. So this is a second course in linear algebra where I had the philosophy that they already did one course where they learned how to do Gaussian elimination. And once is enough. Now you should let the computer do the row operations for you. And then we don't have to stick to 3x3 matrices, right? I can give them a problem involving Jordan canonical form with a 10x10 matrix. And because they can run the computer inside the textbook, they can do that, right? You can't really do that by hand unless you have a lot of free time, right? So the HTML is also really designed with accessibility in mind for compatibility with screen readers and things like that for students with visual impairments, or even for students who don't necessarily have visual impairments, but they have trouble with focus while they're reading the textbook. The The equations are all rendered in MathJax. I don't know if people are aware, but MathJax has this accessibility mode where you can kind of walk through an equation step by step by step, and it kind of gives you all the structure. So it's not 100% there, but people are working on it because a lot of the people in the PreTeXt world are at universities in states where people are coming up with stricter and stricter interpretations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and what you're allowed to have as resources for your students. PreTeXt has kind of come to the rescue for a lot of people for things like writing course outlines in PreTeXt. They're not allowed to have a PDF course outline because it's not fully accessible. So it's you can't put something on the LMS unless it passes an accessibility check is where they're at, right? So PreTeXt helps with that. This doesn't always load. Here we go. Let me see if it loads. There. A colleague of mine, I've never met him in person. He's like my social media friend, Peter Keep. He was my Twitter friend until we ran away from Twitter, and now he's my Blue Sky friend. So Donut is another kind of part of the PreTeXt ecosystem. They write these interactive problems. They're also written in XML. And he's like, I want to do something where students can see a U substitution. And so you can build this slider. I'm trying to do this one-handed because I got the mic. But you can kind of, drag the slider to see the change from X to U and how the graph changes, but the area stays the same. So we can put in little interactive things like that, and you can write some of these donut things so that students can input answers, and you can do answer checking and things like that. Donut is really fun. Okay. Oh, I'm trapped. There we go. Okay. My thoughts as a teacher. Why do I like PreTeXt? It's easy for students to access. I have an open textbook server that I maintain. We can list all of our textbooks by course. That's most of them, by the way, have free resources for students. When the pandemic hit, there was all this scramble. How are students going to get their textbooks from the bookstore? And some students were like a month into the course before they got their books. My students had their books in August because they were online. I just sent them the URL. I said, here's your book. They were off and running before the class began. You have all the multiple formats, which is nice. You can support different students with different modalities as they need them. Oh, I thought I fixed that L. Oh, well, it's still lowercase. You can link directly to paragraphs in the web version. Like if I, wanted to reference this theorem, there's a little link icon there. I can send a student that goes straight to that particular theorem, which is great because they'll always say, there's nothing in the book about how to do this question. And I say, no, here's an example that's the same as your question, but with different numbers. It's always in the book. They say it's not, but it's always in there. PreTeXt is very much they try a little bit harder than LaTeX did to separate the roles of author and publisher. So if you're doing the web version, there's a few different themes you can choose, but the CSS is kind of centrally managed. The styling, you can roll your own if you really want to, but most people just rely on, the default. I do, because I'm not very good at CSS. It's hard. And so you can look at 10 different PreTeXt books and they all have the same kind of layout and look and feel. And so you can say, here's an extra resource and it's going to feel familiar to the students. The videos, the interactives, a lot of students are not so keen on reading these days. I don't know if I'm doing them a favor by giving them an out on this, but maybe in first year at least. And it's getting easier and easier to do all this stuff, the tools for creating it. Like when I started, you needed like about a dozen different things that only ran on Linux, and it took about 8 hours to build a book. And I can build Apex Calculus, which is a gigantic book. The HTML build now takes me about 2 minutes. Used to take 4 hours. There's been a lot of improvements. There are tools for people who don't want to install anything. There's a cloud-based version through GitHub. The technologies keep getting better. So I think I've got like 2 minutes. I'll do a quick run through of some of the other things that are part of this PreTeXt ecosystem. So part of it is just all the people, the PreTeXt people are great. If you are on Blue Sky, you can find us. There's a hashtag, which is PreTeXt Gang. We're the PreTeXt Gang. You can come find us. It used to be on Twitter. We've all left Twitter because it's awful now. And a lot of them are doing, there's opportunities that come up. Like I'm part of an NSF grant right now to study how students think when they answer books in the question. We're writing questions and then doing cognitive interviews. I'm supposed to go to Michigan. I'm kind of worried about that. But anyway, there's a group of people working with people in Kenya right now to write books for their high school because they don't have any materials over there. They're creating free ones. There's lots of fun stuff going on. Runestone, I mentioned earlier. Runestone is a platform that hosts your book where you can essentially have the students log into the textbook. And it's not an LMS. Brad Miller, who runs Runestone, calls it a learning, engineering, and analytics platform. It does gather a lot of data on how students are using the book, but you can also do things like assign a pre-class reading. I want you to read these sections before class. The book will check. Did they actually read those sections? Did they do the activities in those sections before class? Those web work problems that are built into the book, if it's on Runestone, I can assign those as homework. I don't need to have them go to a different server and do the homework over there. I just go into Runestone. I open up the section. I go check, 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 check. These are the questions I want them to do. Hit save. They now have a homework assignment. They do them as they read the book. They get credit for the homework. It's been quite useful. And I don't know. I found it quite good. A lot of work now on what we call small documents, course outlines, worksheets, classroom worksheets, things like that. There's people working on research articles too. There's a bit of a teaming with Archive on trying to get nice HTML research articles out there. And solutions manuals, all those things, we can generate a lot of that stuff automatically. So there's a lot of work going on there. Some people do this team-based inquiry learning. I'm just going to skip past this because I'm almost out of time. They made this like library. If you're doing like mastery-based grading or standards-based grading and you're worried about, I need to generate like 50 questions that are all targeted at this one learning outcome, they have an online thing that does that for you. You pick the learning outcome, you say how many versions you want, and you go. Anyway, there's also work on Braille figures called Prefigure, which is pretty good. And I'll just leave here because I think I'm out of time. If you want to get involved, there's some links there. Support channel on Google Groups is great. Yeah, anyway, I'll stop there.